The Great Plains. -40 degrees. A wind chill that can freeze exposed skin in under 5 minutes. For millennia, this was one of the most brutal winter environments on Earth. Yet inside a thin cone of animal skin, families slept warm and breathed fresh air. This wasn't magic, and it wasn't a primitive tent. It was a thermodynamic marvel, a high-efficiency engine for living. This is the forgotten science of how indigenous people didn't just survive the cold, they conquered it. Acti, the frozen realm, and the common myth. We have been conditioned to see winter as a force of death, a time of hibernation, scarcity, and retreat. On the northern Great Plains of North America, this is more than a metaphor. This is a physical reality. When winter descends here, it is not a gentle affair. It is an invasion. Temperatures plummet to 30, 40, even 50 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. Winds with no mountains or forests to block them scream across the open prairies at hurricane force. This is a climate of extremes, where a single mistake, in judgment, a single failure of gear, means a quiet, frozen death. If you were to take a modern 4-season geodesic dome tent, the best money can buy, and place it in a 40-degree Dakota wind, you would be in a fight for your life. You would be battling condensation, which freezes on the inside of your tent. You'd be battling asphyxiation if you dared to light a stove. You would be cold, damp, and miserable. You would be surviving just barely. Now consider the people who called this land home: the Lakota, the Cheyenne, the Blackfoot, the Crow, the Kiowa, the Comanche. These were not sedentary people. They were nomadic, following the great bison herds. Their entire lives were built on mobility. They could not build permanent subterranean pit houses or heavy log cabins. They needed a home that could be packed up and moved at a moment's notice. And for centuries the world has looked at their solution, the tipi, and dismissed it. We see it in old westerns depicted as a smoky, crude, skin-covered cone. A wigwam, a primitive tent, a temporary shelter barely better than sleeping in the snow. There's this image, this stereotype, that our ancestors were always cold, always struggling. That winter was just this long, miserable period of waiting for spring. It's wrong. The winter camps were a vibrant time. It was the time for storytelling, for mending, for ceremony, for family. We could do this because our homes worked. The tipi, which in our language just means a dwelling, was a perfect machine. It was our fortress, and it was warm. This documentary is the story of that machine. We will deconstruct, piece by piece, the anatomy of this structure. We will reveal how using nothing but wood hide and a profound intuitive understanding of fluid dynamics, the Plains people engineered a home that actively heated itself, ventilated itself, and kept its occupants comfortable, dry, and safe in the very teeth of the Arctic wind. Let's define the engineering problem. Design a structure that meets the following criteria. 1. It must be large enough to house a family of 5, 10, or even more, along with all their tools, food, and spiritual items. 2. It must be completely portable, able to be disassembled by 1 or 2 people in under an hour, and compact enough to be transported by dogs and later horses. 3. It must be stable enough to withstand the 80 to 100 mile-per-hour gales of the open prairie. 4. It must be a comfortable, livable shelter in both 100-degree summers and 40-degree winters. This is what we call an impossible design brief. Portability and stability are natural enemies. A structure that's light enough to be portable is usually the first thing to be destroyed by high winds. A structure that's warm in winter, like a log cabin, is permanent and immobile. A structure that's cool in summer, like a ventilated tent is a death trap in winter. The tipi solves all of these problems at once, and it solves them with a geometric elegance that is frankly astounding. The cone is the answer. The cone. It's the most obvious feature of the tipi, and it's the first stroke of genius. A square-walled structure like a cabin or a modern tent presents a flat, broad-shouldered face to the wind. The wind slams into it, creating immense pressure that can tear it apart. A cone has no flat surfaces. The wind hits it and is instantly deflected up and around. It has an incredibly low drag coefficient. The tipi cooperates with the wind. It doesn't fight it. The wind just slips around it like water over a stone, and the conical shape anchors it. The harder the wind blows, the more it presses the cover against the poles, and the poles against the ground. The wind is what holds it together. But the cone has one more secret. It is not a perfect cone. This is incredibly subtle. Most people never notice it. The tipi is tilted. The back, the side that faces the prevailing westerly winds, is steeper. The front, where the door is slightly more sloped. This tilt does two things. It braces the structure against the main force of the wind like a buttress, and it moves the center of the cone forward. The smoke hole at the top isn't directly over the center of the floor, it's slightly forward. Why? Because the fire pit isn't in the dead center either. It's slightly forward of center to make more room for the living space in the back. The entire design is offset to maximize stability and living space. A structure that is aerodynamic, stable, and spacious. But this is just the outer shell. The real genius lies within. It starts with the materials. This was a home built entirely from the animal that sustained all life on the plains, the buffalo. Act 2. The anatomy of a fortress. A tipi is a marvel of tension and compression. The strength of its bones was paramount. These bones were the poles. The poles were not just any random sticks. They were almost exclusively harvested from the lodgepole pine. The name itself tells the story. These pines, growing in thick, competitive stands in the mountains, shoot straight up towards the sun, self-pruning their lower branches. The result is a pole that is immensely strong, remarkably light, and almost perfectly straight for 20 to 30 feet. The women were the masters of the home. They were the engineers. They would go to the mountains, to the stands, and they would select the poles. This was a long, difficult process. They had to be harvested, peeled of their bark, cured and seasoned often over months, so they wouldn't warp or crack. A good set of poles was a family's most prized possession, more valuable than the cover. The cover might wear out in a few years, but a good set of poles, if cared for, could last a lifetime. And the number of poles defined the home. A small portable hunting tipi might use 11 or 12 poles. A large, comfortable family tipi might use 17 or 20. A huge ceremonial lodge could use 30 or more. But they all started the same way with the tripod. The entire structure rose from a foundation of 3 or sometimes 4 primary poles. These were laid on the ground, and a special sacred knot was tied around them at the precise balancing point. That knot, that's the heart. It's tied with the tail of the rope left long. That long rope is what will later anchor the tipi cover to the ground, inside the lodge, right behind the fire. It's the anchor of the whole home. Once the tripod was raised, the secondary poles were laid into the V-shaped notches of the foundation one by one, in a precise spiraling order. Each pole added rigidity, locking the others in place. Finally, the lifting pole would be added last with the tipi cover already attached to it. What you get is a flexible, strong, conical frame. It's not rigid like a house frame. It has give. In a 100 mph wind, the the whole structure will flex and shift, absorbing the energy. A rigid structure would just snap. The tipi dances with the wind. If the poles were the bones, the cover was the skin, the muscle, and the armor. And it came from the single most important resource on the continent, the American bison. A single large family tipi required 12 to 20 buffalo hides. These were not the heavy, thick-furred robes used for bedding. These were summer hides, taken when the hair was short. But turning a raw, stiff hide into a pliable, waterproof, windproof, and fire-resistant material was a monumental feat of chemistry and labor. This was the women's work, and it was hard work. It was a science. After scraping it thin, you had to tan it. The tanning agent was the animal's own brain. You would mash the brain with the liver and mix it with water and rub this paste into the hide. The enzymes and fatty acids in the brain solution would break down the fibers and make the hide incredibly soft. It had to be worked and worked and worked as it dried. If you just let it dry, it becomes hard as a board. You had to stretch it, pull it, twist it, to keep the fibers separate and soft. It was days of back-breaking work for each hide. After tanning, the hides were meticulously stitched together, using needles made of porous bone and thread, made from the long, strong sinew taken from the bison's back. The stitching itself is clever. The sinew swells when it gets wet. So when it rains, the sinew thread expands in the needle hole, sealing the seam completely. It's a self-waterproofing seam. It's brilliant. But one final step was needed. A white, brain-tanned hide is soft, but it is not waterproof. If it gets wet, it will rot. The solution was to smoke it. You would build a smudge fire, often with rotten wood, to create a lot of smoke. This smoke, the tars and the creosote would permeate the hide. This case hardens the fibers. It makes it water-repellent, and it stops it from rotting. And it gives the tipi that beautiful color and that wonderful smell. That smell to us is the smell of home. This finished cover, now a massive, heavy, semicircular piece of soft, durable buffalo leather, was the armor. It was tied to the lifting pole, raised and then wrapped around the conical frame. It was not sewn shut. Instead, a series of 8 to 12 lacing pins, polished willow or choke cherry sticks, were pushed through corresponding holes, like lacing up a giant boot. This is again genius. Zippers fail, ropes freeze. These simple, smooth wooden pins could be operated with frozen, mittened hands. They were strong, simple, and field replaceable. If one broke, you just whittled a new one. It's the philosophy of elegant simplicity. The cover was then staked to the ground, but crucially it was not staked flush. A gap of several inches was intentionally left at the bottom. This gap, this small, unassuming space, is the first clue to the tipi's real secret. It is the intake for the engine. Act 3, the thermal engine, conquering the void. We have our structure, a 20-foot-tall windproof cone. Now we must live inside it. It's 40 degrees outside. The ground is frozen solid. The hide of the tipi is also 40 degrees. Without an internal heat source, this is just a very stable freezer. The solution, of course, is fire. But fire is a dangerous partner. It consumes oxygen, and it produces a toxic cocktail of carbon monoxide and smoke. This is the modern tent problem. If you light a fire in a sealed space, you will poison yourself. If you open a hole for ventilation, you create a new problem. All your warm air rushes out, and a bitter cold draft rushes in. You're either smoky or you're cold. Usually you're both. The inhabitants of the plains knew this. They knew that a simple smoke hole at the top was not enough. The smoke would eddy, swirl, and cool, filling the living space with an acrid, blinding haze, especially on a calm, cold day. You can't live like that. You can't breathe. You can't see. Your eyes burn. This is not a home. This is a smokehouse. Our people would not live like that. Their solution was a second hidden layer, a piece of technology so simple yet so profound it turned the entire tipi from a passive tent into an active thermodynamic system. It was called the ozan in Lakota, or simply the lining. This was the dew cloth, or inner lining. It was a separate wall circling the entire interior of the tipi. It was not insulation in the way we think of it. Its purpose was far more dynamic. This right here is the absolute pinnacle of indigenous genius. This is the secret. That lining creates a channel, a chimney, a flue, if you will, and it is the engine that drives the entire system. Let's follow the air. Step 1. The engine starts. The small hot fire in the center hearth heats the air inside the living space. This hot air full of smoke becomes buoyant and begins to rise, heading for the smoke hole at the top. This rising column of hot air, an exhaust column, creates a low-pressure area at the bottom of the tipi near the floor. It's a gentle, constant pull. A vacuum. Physics abhors a vacuum. That pressure needs to be equalized. Step 2. The intake. Remember that gap we left at the bottom of the outer cover. The 40 degrees outside air sees this low-pressure area and is sucked into the tipi. But here is the magic. This freezing heavy air does not spill onto the floor and freeze the occupants. It immediately hits the inner lining. The lining forces the cold air up. It channels it. So now you have this column of freezing, dense air racing upward inside the wall channel. This cold, heavy air is moving much faster than the warm, smoky air inside the tipi. Step 3. The piston. This fast-moving, cold, clean air races up the channel and is dumped into the tipi at the very top near the smoke hole. This high-velocity cold air acts like a piston. It hits the slower-moving, smoky hot air and shoves it. It physically ejects the smoke from the hole. It creates a powerful, smooth, laminar flow draft that is continuous. As long as the fire is lit, this engine is running. It means the smoke goes straight up, not mostly up, not in a swirl, straight up like it's being pulled by a rope. You can be sitting by the fire telling a story, and the air at head height is perfectly clear. You are breathing fresh, clean air. This system, known as the chimney effect, or stack effect, accomplishes 3 things at once. First, constant clean air. The tipi is constantly ventilating itself, pulling in fresh oxygen for the fire and the people, and ejecting every wisp of smoke and carbon monoxide. It is safer than many modern cabins. It's a positive pressure fresh air exchange system. We pay thousands of dollars for those in modern homes. They had it perfected. Second, a draft-free floor. The cold air intake is above the living space. The occupants on the floor are living in a bubble of calm, warm air, completely protected from any cold drafts. Third, the warm wall. This is the most subtle and perhaps most comfortable benefit. The inner lining, the ozan, is not in contact with the 40 degrees outer cover. It is in contact with the warm room air. Therefore, the lining warms up to the temperature of the room. When you lean back against your backrest, you are not leaning against a frozen 40 degrees wall. You are leaning against the ozan, which is a comfortable 50 or 60 degrees. It's a warm wall. It radiates warmth back at you. It makes the entire living space feel comfortable, not just the area next to the fire. And what about condensation, the moisture from breathing and cooking? This is what they meant by dew cloth. That moisture-laden warm air rises and some of it hits the cold outer cover. It condenses and freezes on the outer cover inside the channel, where you can't see it and it can't touch you. In the morning, someone would tap the poles. The ice crystals would shatter and fall, but they fall inside the channel harmlessly onto the ground, not onto your bedding. The system is brilliant. But what happens when that 80 metafilech wind starts to blow? Wouldn't it blow down the smoke hole, filling the tipi with smoke and snow? This is where the final elegant piece of the design comes in: the ears, or smoke flaps. The smoke hole was not a fixed static opening. It was an adjustable aperture. These two flaps, controlled by their external poles, were the throttle and steering for the entire thermal engine. The woman of the house, she was the pilot of the tipi. She knew the wind. She could read it by the sound, by the way the cover shivered. And she would go outside and move the poles. A reenactor woman walks to the back of the tipi and moves the two poles, changing the angle of the flaps. This is active aerodynamics. Let's say the wind is blowing hard from the north. She would move the poles to close the north flap and open the south flap. The wind races over the closed north flap, and when it passes the opening, it creates a small, localized low-pressure zone. It's called the Venturi effect. That low-pressure lee sucks the smoke out of the hole even faster. It aligns the exhaust with the wind, so the wind itself helps power the draft. In a swirling blizzard, she could cross the flaps, leaving only a tiny protected hole. In a calm, cold, still night, she would open them wide, maximizing the chimney effect. She was tuning her home, just like you'd tune a drum. She was adjusting it minute by minute to be in perfect harmony with the sky. It was a living, breathing thing. So let's recap. You have an aerodynamic stable cone. You have a chimney system that creates a powerful smoke-free draft. And you have an adjustable, user-controlled exhaust port that can compensate for any external weather condition. This isn't a tent. It's a high-performance, passively powered survival machine. And frankly, we have never ever improved upon it. Act 4 Life. In the warm bubble. The Tipis engine solved the problem of air, but there was another more insidious enemy, the ground. The frozen earth is a heat sink. It is a massive, endlessly cold object that will suck the warmth out of anything it touches through a process called conduction. You could have 70-degree air, but if you're lying on 10-degree ground, you will freeze to death. Your body simply cannot produce heat as fast as the earth can steal it. The plains people understood this perfectly. The floor of the tipi was a multi-layered, sophisticated insulation system. First you would clear the snow. Then you would bless the ground, often with sage or sweet grass. This is a spiritual cleansing, but it also has a purpose. These plants are antimicrobial and insect repellent. Next came the first layer of insulation. You would lay a thick layer of boughs if you were in the mountains. If you were on the plains, you would use thick woven mats of reeds or rushes. The key is trapped air. The needles, the hollow stems, they create thousands of tiny air pockets. Air is the insulator. You are not sleeping on the ground, you are sleeping on a cushion of air. This is the same principle as modern, closed-cell foam sleeping pads. Those boughs are trapping the air, stopping it from convecting. It's a brilliant R-value insulation rating from a completely natural, renewable source. On top of this air mattress came the final layers, the heavy, thick-furred winter buffalo robes. A bison's winter robe is one of the warmest materials on the planet. Its fur is dense and hollow, trapping yet more air. These robes with the fur side up were the carpets and the beds. The occupants were now thermally isolated. The cold air was flowing up the walls, not across the floor. The cold ground was below a thick layer of trapped air insulation. The family was living in a bubble of warmth, completely separated from the lethal cold on all sides. And what of the fire itself? Our modern imagination, fed by movies, conjures a roaring, blazing bonfire in the center. This too is wrong. A huge roaring fire is a disaster in a tipi. It's incredibly inefficient. It consumes fuel at an alarming rate, and it creates too much draft. It would pull cold air in so fast, the engine would overwhelm the heater. The living space would actually get colder. The fire was small, hot, and efficient. Plains people were masters of small fire technology. The wood itself was a precious resource harvested from the river valleys. You'd use dry seasoned hardwood, cottonwood ash box elder. You'd arrange it in a specific way, a star fire or a log cabin stack, to control the burn and direct the heat. It was about stewarding the fire, not just letting it burn. But often on the deep plains, there was no wood at all. The fuel source was once again the bison. Pirita woyapi, buffalo chips. This was our charcoal. The women and children would gather it. It had to be dry. It burns almost smokelessly, and it creates a very hot, long-lasting ember. It's a perfect fuel. The animal that gave us our house, our clothes, and our food also gave us our heat. This is what we mean by relationship. Nothing was wasted. Everything was a gift. A thermal camera reveals the physics of comfort. Look at that. It's a world of difference. The temperature at sleeping level 10 feet from the fire is a perfectly livable 55 degrees. The radiant heat from the small fire is caught by the inner lining, warming the entire bubble. This is not survival. This is comfort. The interior of the tipi was not a random jumble. It was a home organized with a social and spiritual geography as precise as its engineering. The door always faced east. We face the east to greet the morning sun. It's the direction of new beginnings of enlightenment. The first light of day would come in and strike the altar at the back of the tipi. But it's also practical. The prevailing winds are from the west and north. You put the back of your home to the wind. The back of the tipi, the area of honor, was traditionally where the man of the house or an honored guest would sit. The sides were the women's and children's spaces. The woman's side was often the north side, controlling the door and the food, while the man's side was the south, holding the tools and hunting gear. Everything had its place. The food was stored in parfleches, like rawhide suitcases. The medicine bundles were kept on a tripod. The cooking vessels were by the fire. It was a home in every sense of the word, organized, clean, and sacred. And the furniture was as ingenious as the home itself. This was the plains couch, the willow backrest. You could sit up comfortably, lean back, and be supported. You could work, you could bead, you could tell stories. At night, that same backrest would be the headboard of the bed. You'd unroll your sleeping robes, feet to the firehead on the backrest. It was comfortable, practical multipurpose. A bubble of warmth, light, and family, floating in a sea of lethal cold. A home where the laws of physics were marshaled with profound intelligence to create a space of life. Act 5. The loss and rediscovery of wisdom. This perfect harmony, a people, an animal, and a home, lasted for millennia. It was not defeated by a changing climate or a new ice age. It was shattered in less than 2 decades by a deliberate policy of extermination. The great slaughter of the bison in the 1870s and 80s was a military strategy. The U.S. Army knew that to control the plains tribes, they had to destroy their source of life. You kill the buffalo, you kill the people. It's that simple. There is no more hide for the tipi. There is no more hide for the robes. There is no more meat for the winter. There is no more sinew for the thread. There is no more fuel for the fire. The entire system, it just stopped. Forced onto reservations, the people of the plains were issued canvas tents, hot in summer, freezing in winter, and then moved into permanent square log or frame houses. It was a humanitarian disaster. These modern houses were thermodynamic death traps. They were built from single-paned wood full of cracks. They were drafty. The cast-iron stoves were inefficient and often poorly vented, filling the stagnant, unventilated spaces with smoke and carbon monoxide. People got sick. The pneumonia, the influenza, the consumption tuberculosis. It swept through our people. We were moved from the healthiest homes, ever-designed homes that were constantly filled with fresh, clean air, into modern boxes filled with disease. We were told it was progress. It was a betrayal. The tipi, the physical embodiment of millennia of scientific knowledge, vanished from the plains. It became a relic, a symbol of a lost people, relegated to museums and the backgrounds of Wild West shows. The science was forgotten. But wisdom of this magnitude does not stay buried. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the world began to rediscover what the Lakota and Cheyenne had always known. If you want to be comfortable in deep winter, you use a hot tent, and the single best hot tent design in history is the tipi, period. We use canvas now instead of hide, and a small wood stove instead of an open fire, but the principles are identical. You must have the liner. Anyone who tries to hot tent a tipi without a liner gives up in a day. It's smoky, it's drafty, it's miserable. The second you clip in that liner, the whoosh sound starts. The draft engages. The smoke vanishes. The cold air disappears into the walls. It's like a switch is thrown. It's just a perfect design. Today, architects and engineers obsessed with green building and passive design are studying the tipi as a model of sustainability. We're spending billions to design buildings that can ventilate themselves without electric fans. We're trying to create thermal envelopes and double-skin facades to manage heat and cold. We are in effect trying to reinvent the tipi. The Plains people perfected passive user-controlled high-efficiency thermal architecture over 1,000 years ago. Today the tipi has returned. It is once again the center of cultural life for many Plains people. It is a symbol of resilience identity and profound, enduring wisdom. When I see a tipi, I don't just see a tent. I see a university. I see a physics lab. I see a home. I see the wisdom of my grandmothers who knew how to turn wind and hide and fire into a place of warmth and love and spirit. The poles, they are the paths from the earth to the sky. The cover is the sky that holds us. The floor is the earth, our mother. The fire is the heartbeat. The genius was not just in the design, it was in the relationship. We didn't fight the cold. We didn't try to wall it out. We used the cold. We invited the freezing air in and we made it push the smoke out. We made the cold our partner to keep us warm. That is the wisdom. And that is the genius. The genius of the tipi is just one of countless examples of indigenous innovation. This knowledge is not primitive. It is timeless, and it deserves our respect. If this story changed the way you see a simple tent, please like this video and share it with someone who loves history, science, or survival. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the forgotten wisdom of the past. And let us know in the comments what other lost technology or indigenous survival knowledge do you want us to investigate next. Thank you for watching.